Hello, joining me today is Imran Ahmad, is the CHRO of Jashnamel National Co. It is a pleasure to have you here, Imran. Imran is a veteran HR leader, and throughout his career over the past 2 decades, he has actually worked in various sectors and in various stages of an organization. Which brings me to the first question: how do you find the strength to actually motivate people to work on projects that you don't know that maybe they will succeed or maybe not?
Interesting. Yes. Thank you very much first for having me for this conversation. I think it's a very interesting question because every time you start on a project, uh, somewhere there is ambition on your mind. So yes, you may or may not succeed in that, but that's not on your mind at the start of any project. So the start of in any project, there's a lot of optimism and there's a lot of ambition on mind. And it is very important for those who are driving these kind of projects, anyone who's driving, whether these are HR projects or business projects, and largely when we are part of business projects, and as part of the project team. So you buy into that vision board, you buy into that kind of an optimism and excitement, and from there onwards, your role as a project manager or as a project lead is to cascade that ambition and that excitement down through to everybody who's participating in the team. And that's what really makes a project happen. So you're driving through, setting timelines, you're driving people, you're constantly getting them excited towards that, the end outcome of the journey, and you're preparing them for how to go about it, putting the structures in place and all those things. And I think that's what is the key. In some cases, sometimes it might happen that you may not complete the journey, or you may not complete the journey with the outcomes that you expected, which is fine. But the key here is to keep everybody, moving around and keep everybody excited around.
You mentioned the word structure a couple of times, and you have led structures within companies. How did you manage to actually to put in a structure when you don't even know if this is going to work or not?
True. So when I mean structures, it's in two sense. One, from a process point of view, in the process that you're applying, and that goes, that's put through a structure kind of a thing. But in the sense of the question that you're asking, it's more of an organizational structure in place that you're talking about, probably. Yes. Again, it is something that you start with what, as an organization or as a group of people or as a team, you're trying to achieve. So if there's a business challenge, or if there's a business requirement, or if there's some big project that's coming up, so that defines what kind of a structure you require. Now, organizational structure is nothing but, in simply put, it has only 2-3 elements to it. One is the expertise level, what kind of expertise where you require. The second thing is how do you bring that expertise together in what kind of hierarchy? Do you need a very hierarchical structure? Do you need a very, a kind of a loosely put together a structure in an informal reporting? So your organization design largely is determined on the basis of your requirements and what you need to deliver, how you need the overall hierarchy to be, what kind of deliverables and the targets that you need to put in place. Now, you may not know exactly, like you said, whether the structure will work or not. But again, going back, you have an objective, you have a certain vision board, and you have a belief that in order to deliver that particular objective, what's the kind of capabilities, and in what, how do you sync them together? Do you put them in a very tight hierarchical structure? Do you put them in an informal structure, like I said? And that determines the design of the organization structure. And if you've got the design, right, and if you structure it correctly, obviously along with its deliverables, its accountability, etc., most of the time you wouldn't go wrong.
Right, right. But what are the challenges for that? It's not easy at all, right? I assume.
Of course, every time we deal with business challenges, And especially when it comes to people-related challenges, and I'll keep focused on towards the HR side. Uh, Nothing is easy. It's never easy dealing with human beings in an organizational or corporate settings, and not. I mean, I don't say that in a bad way, but interestingly, because obviously we many other domains you are largely focused on one element, which is largely logic. And I often say this, that HR is one of those sort of imperfect domains where you deal with a mix of logic and emotions, because you're dealing with human beings. So in many other functions, you can just lay out the plain logic and everybody can go move along that logic and achieve your results. When we work in human resource, and when we put together, working the human resource strategies, along with the logic, there's also a lot of emotions. So you need to manage and make sure that those emotional aspects are also taken care of. So there might be people who might, who you put the best of capabilities in terms of talented people together, but then there are interpersonal issues, interpersonal relations, how they interact with each other, how they relate to each other in order of hierarchy, and that quite can affect the outcomes. They quite can affect the direction in which the project is heading. So those are very, very, I would say that the finer nuances that has to be taken care of at every point of time. Communication is the key. Setting the goal, the expectation definitions are key. And then you need very strong leadership from time to time. Then, you need someone in the room who's leading those projects to say, listen, guys, stop squabbling. This is how we're going ahead. And this is what we need to deliver, and this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do, whether you like it or not, and whether you get along with each other or not. So, I mean, I'm summarizing it in a way which generally doesn't happen in mature people, but in a sense, that's what it is. So you have to get all of those elements right in order to make sure, and especially when you are on projects which are time bound, which are which have got a high cost elements to it, where you're racing against times. There are very strict deadlines, or the deliverables of the outcomes are non-negotiable. So that becomes a very strong part of the entire project management, and from both logic as well as emotional side of project management.
My internet's been squabbling a little bit, but it's great that you mentioned the emotional part, because I've been very lucky to be in a lot of different projects throughout my career, and I do see some projects actually fail because of the emotional part, where people actually don't get along with each other. Um, so how do you manage that? Yes, of course, work is work, but how do you manage that? Is there a procedure where you tell people, where you bring in people together, explain to them the business goals, and try to work things out? Or what are your tips for that?
Look, it's very interesting again, that the more we grow up, and especially, and I'm talking about corporate hierarchy here, I mean, not purely from an age point of view. So the more you grow up in a corporate hierarchy, there's more propensity to behave like children. So the more people grow up in the corporate hierarchy, the more they might have the tendency to squabble and to bring up issues on very small things. Who reports to whom, and what is the frequency, and would I go to somebody's room, or would somebody come to my room, and where are we meeting? Are we meeting in a common place, or are we meeting at my room? Are we meeting at your room? And sometimes all these issues can start to create those very subtle underlying points of friction between people, and which then sort of if gets escalated, and it starts to affect the chemistry. The moment it starts to affect the chemistry, it starts to affect the overall team dynamics within any project. So in any project, and especially if people coming together are not from the same team, and if they're coming from discipline or different departments, when they come together, obviously all these dynamics are at play. So the usual way to make sure that these do not interfere with the space of your project is when to set out very clear expectation, and in terms of the project guidelines, times, etc., but also to set out very clear expectations in terms of individual contribution as well as a group contribution, in expectations in terms of timelines, expectations in terms of the norms of roles and the limits of who would do what and where the authorities exist. So this is sort of the basic hygiene that needs to get sorted out and put together in place once we're starting, and somebody, whoever is facilitating it, or whether there are sort of defined leader of a group or there's a natural leader within the group. It may depend on the setting.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but who do you think is more important in initiatives and projects that are starting? The leader who is supposed to lead this towards the vision, or the people who are actually implementing it?
Interesting question. It sometimes also depends on the nature of the project, I would say. I'm a big proponent that most of the time there should be a defined leader who is leading the project. Now, obviously it doesn't matter where the level of importance lies, especially if you have a good leader at helm. The leader would know his job is not leadership. His job is not to enforce his technical competence, but his job is to make sure that the entire the team is operating and contributing within rhythm, and then everybody's contributions are being channelized to the optimum. So in most of the cases, largely it's a good leader is more important, because you need to make sure that the efforts are being channelized properly. And most of the time people do appreciate, and this is, by the way, research, that most of the time people do appreciate having a leader who can define things when things are not clear. In some cases, you may want to just have a group of people together where it might be situational leadership. It may work in some situation, but most of the time, I would assume that a strong, defined leadership works better.
Imran, thank you very much for your time. Is there anything else that you would like to add here in this part of bringing a small business or a small initiative within a corporate world up?
I think we've covered most of the points. In closing, I can only say that for bringing up any of these close initiatives, there recognition and making sure that you give constant feedback to the people who are working on those projects is also one of the critical points. Recognizing the efforts, obviously, at the same time being tough and calling out the failures, but more importantly, recognizing the efforts, recognizing the contributions, and giving constant feedback to people, timely feedback with clarity, and very logical, blunt feedback to people helps in reiterate, improving their performance. I think that's also a key for any success of any initiative in an organization.
Thank you very much, Imran, for your time. It's a pleasure speaking with you today.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.